Why on earth did one of the last software updates change the way you scale objects in Photoshop while preserving their proportions? You used to have to hold down the Shift key, unlike virtually any other software on earth. If you didn't hold the Shift key, you simply scaled the object regardless of its proportions. It's been like this for 16 years now. Yet someone at Adobe headquarters thought it was a sensible idea to invert the process, thus throwing almost 20 years of conventional interactions down the drain. And here's the most f***ed up part. Only Photoshop does this. No other software in their creative suite follows this behavior. This simple tweak is probably responsible for unquantifiable amounts of frustrations added to people's workflow as they switch between Illustrator and Photoshop and have to remember the change when scaling the objects in their compositions. And I know that some people out there might be tempted to say,
well, if you were an actual power user, you'd know you can go to the advanced setting and open the fourth menu on the right.
Listen to me. I pay top dollar for these softwares every month. And I want to learn to program to be able to use them the way literally everyone expects them to work. Let's move on. The problem with inconsistencies throughout the creative suite is beyond my understanding and still baffles me to this day. Here's a color picker in Adobe Illustrator. Here's the color picker in Adobe Photoshop. Here's the color picker in After Effects. Here's the color picker in Adobe Premiere. And here's the f***ing color picker in Adobe InDesign.
Why?
I need to know this. This color picker is a nightmare of usability. It is the archenemy of good UI, the final boss of graphic designer. I challenge you to think of a single color and try to find it in this joke of a color picker. Whenever I'm designing on this software, I usually switch to Adobe Illustrator, pick my color of choice, copy its text code, and paste it into the dialog box, which was mercifully included in this evil interface. They're thinking a break from this freaking thing. Alright, I can do this. And this problem is widespread. Here's the different types of blur you can apply in Photoshop, and here's the different types of blur you can apply in After Effects. Here's the tab for motion blur on Photoshop. Everyone knows what this does. Here's the directional blur tab on After Effects. It's the same effect. It yields the same results, almost, because even the parameters are inconsistent. The interface is almost identical, and yet we get different names. Have you tried making a line in Adobe Photoshop? If so, I'm sorry. You might have gone in with the illusion that the controls would vaguely resemble the ones in Illustrator, as it stands to reason that they wouldn't write new controls and waste time on something they had already built perfectly.
And this is where Adobe surprises you once more.
I still have no clue what kind of twisted mind would ever conceive such a convoluted system to draw a f***ing line. I've been working with Photoshop for 5 years now, and I'm not ashamed to admit it took me a few minutes to get how this f***ing thing works. Holy shit, it's hot in here. You go in and you draw a line. You might notice that your line has a fill and a stroke setting. So, like you would on Illustrator, you increase the stroke to get a
thicker line.
But nothing happens. You play around with the fill and stroke settings, but nothing seems to work. And then, after a few useless Google searches that take you to blogs where you might find your answer, but only after willing to commit to reading all of this, and let's be honest, you won't, you finally see it. The weight setting. Conveniently positioned the furthest away from all of the other settings regarding the line's appearance, after the blending, alignment, and layer options, this text box will allow you to set the thickness of your line. This is when you find out that your line is effectively a rectangle with a fill and a stroke color, but that you can't distort from its vertices, virtually identical to the square tool. Yes, I'm not kidding. The line tool in Adobe Photoshop, a software with a $250 per year price tag, is actually a flattened rectangle. I still have no idea why this is still a thing. And some might think of these as small inconveniences, nothing more than simple oversights on the part of the developers. So here's something even more nitpicky. Why do things scale from the top left corner in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, but scale from the center in After Effects and Premiere? This is so annoying and unnecessary. It's much harder to align objects when scaling from the center. Why can't I drag around my viewport holding down the spacebar in all of the Creative Suite softwares, except for Premiere, and I'm stuck with their default choices? And why on earth did they lock you in a set number of percentages when you zoom? Why can't I zoom without it snapping to the set numbers? As long as we're talking about inconsistencies in the way you can interact with objects, here's another one. Drawing and interacting with masks in Adobe After Effects and Premiere is completely different. Premiere's way to go about it makes no sense. It breaks any rule established by all of the image manipulation softwares that came before it and is beyond comprehension. You seemingly can't scale the whole thing like you normally would. These handles to control expansion and feather only serve to make things even more confusing, as they're not present in any other software they make and are pretty superfluous when you have a dedicated panel. There doesn't seem to be any way to align vertices precisely, as the software doesn't snap them into place when moving them. In Premiere, you can drag your masks around without affecting the source layer, and yet when trying to do the same thing in Adobe After Effects, you'll end up moving the whole layer below. Why are there so many inconsistencies? These softwares are made by the same company. They're supposed to have some sort of synergy, and yet, even for the smallest things, you can't rely on the rules they themselves have established. Oh, and why the can I drag and duplicate locked layers on Photoshop? In every other software, I can't even interact with locked layers. That's the point. This always causes you to accidentally duplicate random shit you had locked before because you misclicked and dragged the layer below the object you want to select. Look, I know the Adobe Creative Suite is arguably the best thing that ever happened for creatives all around the world in the past 2 decades. Its software streamlined most of the workflow required by creative professionals, and in some specific fields like graphic design, they literally revolutionized the whole industry. All of this to say, I am well aware that what I discussed here lands safely and unequivocally in the land of first world problems. But as long as I'm going to be paying $50 a month for this shit, I'm going to keep complaining. Hope this gave you some relief. It sure did to me. Now if you will, it's 95 degrees outside and I need a drink. Thank you.